Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Andy's Treasure Trove, the interview podcast where I share some of my favorite people, places, things, and ideas with you and for posterity. Over the last 10 years, I've chatted with filmmakers, writers, performers, and other artists, as well as many fascinating and category-defying people who are part of my own personal treasure trove and should be part of yours too. This is episode 21, and this time my conversation is with a man named Hugh King. He's also known as Chopper-King from the TV show Biker Build-Off, Motorcycle Mania. What I've selected from our conversation for this episode has to do with three distinct parts of Hugh's life that I found especially interesting. One, his childhood pyromania. Two, the part he played in the anti-war GI Coffeehouse Movement during the Vietnam War in the late 1960s and early 70s. And finally, his late career emergence into the persona of Chopper-King. Let's listen.
This story is central to my life, and it's part of who I am. When I was 8, my parents were fighting. We lived in New Jersey because my dad was having an affair with the, quote, French woman, unquote. And my mom was getting sick of it. She'd put up with his ways during the war, but when he came home, I think she expected him to act differently. My parents were having a hard time of it, and they were arguing bitterly. And they moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to try and patch things up. But it was a hell year for my sister and I because they were fighting every night bitterly. And we didn't understand why. And they never explained to us. Because you never said anything to your kids at that point. Everything was kind of swept under the rug. And everything was about appearances. And so we knew emotionally that the shit was hitting the fan. But consciously, there was no talk about it. In fact, we had formal dinner every night. I got dressed up for dinner every night, brushed my hair, so as did my sister, and we had this lovely Saturday evening toast type meal every night. But it was like the surface was intact, but the morale was cracked. And I remember we used to hover on the landing while my parents went at each other in the most atrocious way. I mean, they didn't hit each other. There was no knives or clubs, but it was this physical knockdown, drag out. And it must have upset me terribly. Beside that, my father had come out from the war, I'm going to write a book about this sometime. No one ever has. But I was my mother's darling for 4 years, and who the hell was this guy? He came back from the war, and I hated him on the spot. I didn't know who he was. He was a complete stranger, my dad. And many kids at that juncture had that experience. And I don't think anybody's ever written about it because it traumatized us. And, it's why I'm so crazy to this day, probably. Or I have problems. I'm not crazy. I have some shortcomings, let's put it that way. Things that have kept me back from something. Anyway, I became a pyromaniac, and I'm going to jump forward. Let's see, so I was 8 then. So if you subtract 8 from 70, and I'm going to be 70 in a month, that is 62 years ago when I lived in Milwaukee. And I recently visited there because I was there for one of my TV shows about choppers, about motorcycles. And I was sort of the semi-host, and I met these bike builders there, and I set them on their way. And I decided, God, I'm going to go see this house in Milwaukee where I grew up. I'm going to find it. And I did. I found it quite easily. And it looked pretty much as I remembered it, except the street was much nicer. In fact, it was a lovely street. And I brought my little digital camera with me, and I was taking a picture of the house. And the lady who lived there came out and asked me, what are you doing? I said, I'm taking a picture of this house. And she said, why? And I said, because I used to live here. She said, so really? I said, yeah, I lived here right after the Second World War. She said, well, why don't you come in? So she invited me in. And I think by the end of my visit, she wished she hadn't. Because the first thing that happened is we went upstairs to what used to be my bedroom, this little room on the second floor, overlooking the street. I said, oh, yeah. And at this point, it was not a bedroom. It was a study. I said, yeah, this used to be my bedroom. This is a room I almost burned down. And she said, what? I said, yes. I said, I was complete pyro when I was 8. I was having issues, and I was acting out like crazy. And one afternoon, I was throwing darts out the window, which had cotton balls on the dart end, which I dipped in alcohol and lit on fire. And I threw them out the window, and I guess one of them caught the curtain on fire as it went out. And I went down to retrieve it, and when I came back up, my sister, thank God, was throwing great buckets of water on the wall because the flame had ignited the curtain, this cloth drape, and gone right up the wall. And they caught it, or I would have burned the house down. And she said, oh, well, okay, that's fine. But I noticed she had a little odd look in her face. But she was pretty, game. She understood. I was just a little kid. So then we went down the basement. I said, oh, the basement. My dad used to cook bread here. He was in yeast business at this point, and he was way into making bread. And there was a stove and an oven over here. And this is, right here is where Jerry Heindel and I almost burned the house down. I said, yeah, we were lighting bonfires on the floor here. And we had a rubber, what they call a pulley, automotive pulley, circle. Rubber, and we had the bonfires inside the rubber pulley, and we assumed that this fire couldn't go anywhere. Well, anyway, my mom caught us, and I caught holy hell for that. And they were really angry at me, and justifiably so, and I ran away. But then I came back.
Did you run away with a little kerchief tied to the end of a stick?
No, I think I just ran away. But then I came back, and I went in the garage and I slept in the car. And they never did find me. So then, I think at that point, my sister was breaking streetlights in the park.
That was her thing.
That was her thing. And we were also stealing there were little metal treats in the bottom of Cracker Jack boxes. Real nice little cars and stuff. And we were going in there, or my sister was. She was going in there and prying open the bottom of the boxes and stealing this stuff right out of them without buying the Cracker Jacks. Well, we got into a lot of hell for that. Then, me and my friend, we were playing with matches under the pine tree in the front yard. And the neighbors, and this was Milwaukee, Wisconsin, called the cops. Very law-abiding. My mother couldn't stand the place. She was from the South. She never understood those people, and they didn't understand her. And it was cold, and she hated to be cold, and she was not happy there. And I was not happy there. I don't think my sister was particularly happy there either. But the one that really got this woman, present-day owner of the house, was when we looked out the window across Summit Avenue, little nice shady street in Milwaukee. And I said, oh, yes, that's the house that the lady lived in who kicked my dog. My dog peed on her manicured golf green type lawn, and she came out and kicked my dog. Well, I wasn't going to stand for that. So me and my friend Jerry again, we sent her a death threat. And what we did is we got a piece of paper and we wrote on it, and I should remember this, word for word. You will die in your bed at midnight if you do not deliver $25,000 to the corner of Summit and Bellevue. You will die in your bed at midnight. And we put little bloody daggers all around it, and we roasted it in the oven to give it that kind of pirate death threat look. And we put it in her mailbox. She called the FBI. Milwaukee, mind you. She called the FBI. Well, they figured out who it was in about 5 minutes. So late one night, there's a knock at the door. It's dark. It's always dark in Milwaukee. And there are these two guys in suits and overcoats, pork pie hats, open the door and they say, "This is the FBI. Are your parents home?" We talked to my parents, and my friend Jerry was with them. They'd gone and gotten Jerry first. So while they're talking to my parents, Jerry and I are in the little drawing room there. And he says, "Hugh, we're in deep trouble. We're 8 years old at this time." He said, "We've been busted by the FBI. They came and they got me. They put me in the back of the squad car." And he said, "And the whole way over here, I was sitting on a stack of submachine guns." He said, we're in serious problem here. We're in difficulty. It's all over." Anyway, these guys came in and said to us as little kids, "Do you realize that you're guilty of the federal crime of extortion?" And we looked at each other and went, "What's that?" What's extortion? What the hell is that? And they lectured us and they left. And you know what? I have to think my parents were really pissed off at them.
What then?
With them. They thought it was ridiculous.
Overkill.
Complete overkill.
Which it was.
Especially
if the woman knew that it was the neighbor kids. I don't know.
That's Milwaukee. So at 8 years old, I was arrested, but not charged with extortion. So that was a rough year for me, besides breaking a few windows and lighting a few more fires.
Were you successful at actually burning anything down?
No. We almost burned the garage down. But, so then, that was horrible. But, going back, when you look back on it, 68 years later, it's ridiculous. And 62 years later, that's ridiculous because, well, first of all, it's not funny that a little kid would be acting out this way. But what's funny is that this woman, is me telling the story to the woman, and believe me, towards the end of my little visit, she ushered me out. She was very nervous, and that's my Milwaukee story.
Was she alone in the house?
Well, no, her boring daughter came in, who was alarmed. Became immediately alarmed that I was even in the house.
Well, how were you dressed, and how do you think you
I was dressed like the Chopper-King. I had all my biker drag on with my leather vest with a big skull on the back and stuff like that, and my boots. So I did look a little bit outlandish, I suppose.
I'm kind of surprised she invited you in the first place.
Well, I have an honest space.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like people invite you in, right? I know you can go in practically anywhere, right? People always say yes to you, right? Correct?
They used to say yes more often.
Oh.
But yeah, I can still usually
You
get
have
around.
that boyish face. In around 68, 69, 70, there was a whole movement in the United States. It was called the Coffeehouse Movement. And what it was is radicals were going to it was called coffee houses because they were establishing coffee houses on the edges of major military bases in the United States. And they went to Fort Bragg, Fort Sill, Fort Hood in Washington, Fort Ord in California, and there was one at Fort Dix, New Jersey, which was a major jump-off point for Vietnam. So the radicals, a lot of people from SDS, which was Student for a Democratic Society, which was the radical arm of the student movement, established, they were called coffee house collectives. And so you not only had this coffee house out of which you published propaganda and newspaper, but you had to live someplace. In this particular case, we had a farmhouse near Fort Dix. It was an abandoned farmhouse which we rented, and we all lived there. But in the daytime, we went to the coffee house, which was a converted Carvel stand. And Carvel was soft ice cream stand, and we turned it into this action center where the GIs would come, the soldiers would come after they got off duty, and we would foment. We would foment trouble and revolution. And
You're talking about cappuccino, right?
No, not talking about cappuccino. We're about fomenting trouble. And they would work on the newspaper, and they would write articles in what they had seen in Vietnam and what the army was up to. And it was very insurrectionary. And the army pretended like they didn't notice it, but we caused a lot of problems. And rightly so, because we wanted to stop it, the war in Vietnam. And by the way, we helped do it. There's no question about it. I'm very proud of that period of my life that I went from not a political person to a political person, mostly because of what was happening in Vietnam. And I had been in the army myself, and I didn't want to see it was wrong. Our young soldiers were being killed over there. And I, at that point in my life, was determined to stop it. So we went down. The coffee house had already been started. And it was high drama, and it was dangerous. It was truly dangerous because there were a lot of people in the military that wanted to kill us. And we had soldiers there who had been shot in Vietnam. We had soldiers there who had been involved in a stockade insurrection where they tried to burn the Fort Dix stockade down. They were called the Fort Dix 18 or something like that. And there was a lot of crazy stuff going on at that time. But we were also naive. We were tremendously naive. We didn't know the forces that we were dealing with. But we had the moral authority. When you have the moral authority, or when you sense that you have the moral authority, nothing can stop you. You are an unstoppable force. That's like Joan of Arc. She had the moral authority. So we felt the same way. And you know what? We did have the moral authority because that is, as it's turned out, what we were doing was absolutely correct. We were doing a good thing, although we were vilified mightily. But anyway, it was hot, and it was fun, and it was dangerous, and it was an experiment in living, and we all lived in this farmhouse. And, we partied every night. We were smoking tons of dope. The GIs would come home, and they would all be dropping acid. They would be listening to what's that band? Led Zeppelin was their favorite band. So they'd be stoned all night listening to Led Zeppelin, and we hardly ever slept because we were so keyed up about what we were doing. We were young, so we had tons of energy. But we also knew, we weren't totally stupid, that there were a lot of people out that were like out there to kill us. They were something terrible was going to happen. So we had a security system, and we had night watch, and we were armed. We were armed to the teeth. We got, I got a shotgun from my dad. He gave me a shotgun. We had old rifles, and we had a few crackpots that had Molotov cocktails, and we were ready that some night they were going to come and try and get us. And they actually did. The Minutemen did actually try to get us one night, and we had a shootout with them in the woods, a brief shootout. But our trump card is half the people who were staying in the house were soldiers. They had just got back from Vietnam, and they were no stranger to automatic weapons. So there was a brief firefight, and then the Minutemen split. Nobody got hurt. So then we decided we better beef up security. So this is the funny part. So we said, well, what do we got to do first? Well, we've got to dig foxholes all around the house. Because when the shooting starts, we're all going to run out of the house, jump in the foxholes. And we had this whole elaborate escape plans. We'd go from foxhole to foxhole, and then we would get in these cars and try to speed out of there. And it seemed logical at the time, but when I look back on it, it was ridiculous. And then we also said, we're gonna barricade the windows. And so we spent a couple of days, or 3 days, spreading chicken wire over the windows and stapling the chicken wire so that, when they came to throw the tear gas canisters through the windows, they wouldn't go through. And so everyone think, okay, now we're set. We have our guns, we have ammunition, we have our Molotov cocktails.
And plenty of acid and coffee.
Plenty of acid, tons of marijuana. We're really set here. And I think this plan was conceived, in an acid trip, maybe. But that was okay. It was perfectly valid at the time. So we decided, look, it seems to be safe and foolproof here. We better have a dry run. So what we did is, and I guess we had decided to do this a couple of weeks after we dug the foxholes and put the wire up and so forth. What we decided to do is have like a dry run, like a fire drill. And we did it during the day, not at night, so we could see what had happened. So everybody got in the house, and we rang the alarm, which we had. We had an alarm. We rang the alarm. Everybody came running out of the house. They jumped in the foxhole. The only thing that they'd forgotten is that it rained the previous week. And it was like 6 feet of water that they jumped into. And then I got these like number 6 cans of peas, petit, what do they call it? Petit four, or the petit peas, little tiny French peas, petit point. And I had about 5 or 6 of those because I figured that would be about the size of a tear gas canister. And I heaved them at the windows. And they went right straight through and hit the wall on the inside. It was like there was no barrier there at all. They not only went through the chicken wire, they went right through the glass. I think it was soon after that we decided we were in an unsafe position. We better get the hell out of there. And but not till we had this massive demonstration where we actually got them to cancel the biggest military event there is, which is called Armed Forces Day, where they have flyovers and formations. We actually got them to cancel it. And I had my little kids with me at the time, which they hate me for to this day. But I told them, listen, when the shooting starts, you just go go upstairs and get in the cast iron bathtub. You'll be okay.
Is that what they did during the drill?
Yes.
While their father was throwing
and they've never forgiven me to this day.
I think you cared enough to tell them to get in the bath instead of jump into the mud hole.
Well, yeah, but I mean, Jesus, God, any reasonable person wouldn't have their little kids down in a dangerous situation like that.
Not with the guns and the...
Not with that. I mean, that's so stupid. But we thought we were invincible. I had my 15 minutes of fame. The Chopper-King is a great moment in my past. I did a series called Biker Build-Off, Motorcycle Mania. And I was the executive producer. And in the middle of it, I sort of became the host. I started inserting myself in the shows as the lawgiver and the decider of conflicts and also the trophy giver-outer. And then so I started to be more and more on camera. And then since my last name is King, I got the nickname Chopper-King. And then I started to be a character, like a known TV character. And I loved it. I still love it. I wish it would come back. I don't think it will. So I had T-shirts and I had my own logo, which is this. You ever see the logo?
I think
it's
so.
It's a skull with tribal flames all around. It's very cool. And I got free merch. People were laying all these high-priced garments on me. Like, I have this gorgeous leather vest with sterling silver buttons and this embossed Chopper-King logo on the back with, it also has like a stingray inlay to it. Very jazzy. Then I have this beautiful leather shirt with, it was like $1,000 shirt that people were just giving me because once you start appearing on TV, you become a clothes rack for them, and then people will give you stuff so that it's called product placement. And I got this beautiful pair of boots that are made up, how they have stingray pattern on them. I also got a motorcycle that was made for me on TV and was given to me on TV. I still have it. You ever see it?
I have.
You've seen a picture of it. It's this bitchin' chopper.
In fact, later, can we kind of take a picture of it so my listeners can see it?
Well, it's not here.
Oh, it's not here.
No. But I have a card with a picture of it on it. And, it's this death machine, really. It's got the fender comes to a bayonet point. The intake tanks look like, they have like a scalloped edge that looks like devil's talons. It's got a 150 horsepower motor in it, which is monstrous for a motorcycle. It'll go 0 to 60 faster than a Ferrari. Not that I've ever done that, but it'll do it.
Right.
So it's quite the machine. I've ridden it. Not a whole lot, but some. I got to ride it in Bonneville, Salt Flats, which was one of the great experiences of my life. And so I have my machine, I have my boots, I have my shirt, I have my ponytail. So I created, this look evolved, and I became known as Chopper-King. So I get stopped in airports. Hey, Chopper-King, how you doing? Love your show. And, hey, Chopper-King, sign my autograph book and photo ops. And it was great. It was like I was Tom Cruise or something for about 15 seconds. Now, nobody notices me. I'm just no longer, a grand TV persona. In fact, I'm not a TV persona at all, but at least I've been there and I've tasted fame, 15 seconds of it. And it's fun. It's hard work too.
Well, I would imagine that, it's sort of like a double life. I mean, you think you're walking through the airport and suddenly you're on.
Yeah, you're on. You have to be. Well, I'm friendly. I mean, I'm an outgoing. I like to shake people's hands, and I like people. I'm not. I can be reclusive, but I'm actually very comfortable with people. And, I have a good time with people, and I like them, and I generally respect people. There are a few people out there who can go to hell, but the majority of people are just, I like them as people, and I get along well with the general public. So, if somebody'd stop me in the airport, all well and good. Now, but if you're really famous, I think it's overwhelming.
I would imagine it must be.
It is. It's overwhelming.
That's when you have to get into all the disguises and security details and all that.
So just having a touch of it is okay, but if you had to wade through a phalanx of people every day, or when you went outside, you'd go crazy.
And be really very aggressive press and so forth.
Yeah, but
paparazzi.
But the minute you get nasty is they crucify you.
Right.
So, fortunately, I never reached that position.
I hope that you feel mostly fortunate for your little, that period of time, and not too wistful about losing it.
Well, I want it back, I'd do anything to get it back, but can't think of what it is.
Well, that reminds me of a book by Barbara Sher. I could do anything if only I knew what it was.
Yeah, that's right.
And also,
I'll kiss any ass. Just I don't know where. Just tell me where.
Your story reminded me. My dad became acquainted with Joe D'Alessandro.
Okay.
And Joe D'Alessandro's business card at the time said, Joe D'Alessandro, former Warhol superstar, will work for food.
Yeah, that's what it's like. But if you think of Hollywood here, what you can think of is the legion of people who at one time were in your consciousness but are no longer there. Like, think of Saturday Night Fever and John Travolta's dancing partner. What is her name? Where did she go?
Right.
She disappeared. They disappear people. So many people have been there and then they're not there. They're gone.
And I think I've heard, or, at least seen in movies, people can get addicted to or obsessed with that former notoriety and feel less than.
And they go crazy and they kill themselves or they get on drugs and they miss it. It's because it's a rush. When you get recognized by people, absolute strangers, people want to take your picture and so forth and so on. It's a super mega shot of coffee to the ego. And you, I was never in that position, but you can certainly get addicted to it. And when it's not there anymore, you turn to drugs, which I haven't done yet.
Well, for a pyromaniacal, chopper-riding former militant radical, Hugh is actually a very nice man and a pleasure to be friends with. You can see a photo of him as Chopper-King on andystreasuretrove.com, and while you're there, you can also view a recent video of Hugh at the controls of a disabled Titan II missile that we visited together at the Titan Missile Museum here in Tucson, Arizona, a few months ago. It's worth checking out. My thanks to Hugh for sharing his stories with us, and next time we'll hear from Hugh's wife, Karen Peterson, about her work at the Writers Guild of America Library, where she was head librarian. I hope you'll listen then. Meanwhile, won't you please share my podcast widely and leave a review of the show on iTunes? I thank you very, very much. Bye for now.